It is September 18th, 2025. Glad to see so many of you joining us on this Thursday morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, perhaps evening, for anybody joining us in Europe. Um, my name is Brett Nackman with the College Autism Network. This is uh, one of our favorite things to be doing during the academic year, which is having our Canvas presentations each month, learning from scholars and practitioners, self-advocates, educators, and additional folks connected to the autism community doing work about autism and in higher education. And if you haven't been to one of our Canvas presentations before, welcome. This is our College Autism Network Virtual Association of Scholars, or Canvas. And we're delighted today to have a couple of colleagues talk with us about autistic college students' friendship experiences. We have Dr. Carly Isaacson Ball and Katie McDermott. We're delighted to have them here, and the folks I work closely with, and we're excited to share with you more about our work as part of the PIECE's Autistic College Student Success Study. So we'll get to their work in just a few minutes. But before we get started, as we often do in Canvas, we start with a little icebreaker. So if you are inclined to participate in the chat or even verbally, you're welcome to do so. And the prompt for this month is, what are you doing to get prepared for Halloween, which is about 6 weeks away, I think. But it feels like it started in July with all the merchandise in the stores. So maybe it's been a several month long celebration already. But what are you doing to get prepared for Halloween if you celebrate? This is also a chance if people want to share costumes or activities or things that are related to the fall. So we have hiking, growing pumpkins, eating candy. Great to suss out the good ones. Ken's buying candy. Yeah, for sure. What else? Hockey seasons in high gear, for sure. Selecting music for our church fall festival. Darrow's mentioning that. Gerald is saying buying candy and sharing with staff. Audrey's getting ready for Rocky Horror. Uh, Caden's thinking about logistics of a costume party. Fun. Lori is figuring out costumes with children. Costume brainstorming for Colleen as well. Cooking for the Jewish holidays for Beth. Michael's decorating scarecrows. Harley, cider drinks and pumpkin-related sweet treats. Um, Oc Oktoberfest. Oh, that's very clever. Um, I think there's just no shortage of fun examples here. So, and mind you, it's still a month and a half away. So we'll see where people are at our next Canvas meeting in October in terms of the progress folks are making on these different fronts. So all very, very exciting. Uh, and if there's additional things people want to enter in the chat, feel free to do so. A few updates for us here at College Autism Network. As always, we encourage you to join our listserv if you're not already on there, because that is the mechanism where you're going to hear about our future meetings and presentations, as well as share information about research studies or articles or various resources. So please be sure to be on there. Um, and of course, we know that many of you are official CAM members, which afford you a variety of benefits, including discounts on our College Autism Summit, which is literally right after Halloween concludes formally. We start on November 2nd here in Pittsburgh, and for that, I'll turn it over to our executive director, Lee Williams.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, we're like 7 weeks away, which is amazing. When as many of you probably know, when you work to plan an event, you start way, way, way in advance, and it just seems like it's going to be forever till it gets there, and then suddenly it's right at your doorstep. Our program lineup is amazing. A lot of really interesting topics, and I'm pleased to say a number of new presenters, people that have not been at the summit before. And so I really feel like through this group and other ways, we are broadening our circle of scholars and practitioners. So I hope you'll be able to come. I will put the link there. Registration is open now, and we've got some great pre-conference events, and we've got some really fun activities that our Pittsburgh folks are planning for us in addition to the sort of serious stuff. We've got therapy dogs and painting and photos and yeah, so please join us.
Great. Thank you, Lee. I know I'm excited about it, and not just because it's in my neighborhood this year, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, we're looking forward to seeing many folks in Pittsburgh. Um, Great to see you in the chat, Michael. I'm glad you're going to be able to come for the first time, so welcome. Uh, let's turn it over to all of you for a few minutes now. Are there any resources that you'd like to share with the community? There's several dozen of us in the space, so you have an audience. Any celebrations or resources or tools or articles you've come across that you think would be beneficial for everybody else to be aware of. So feel free to drop in the chat or turn on your microphone.
I have something I could jump in with.
Yeah, go ahead, Audrey.
Thanks. I'll be so brave and turn on my camera. Um, a book that me and my friend Chris co-authored is coming out today. So I'm very allergic to self-promotion, but I thought I would share. It's called Understanding and Affirming Autistic Clients, a brief guide for mental health professionals. And the goal of it is basically to provide a lot of information on neuroaffirming practice to providers from the perspective of autistic clinicians in a way that's hopefully very accessible and pretty compact for especially therapists who are so busy with continuing education otherwise. Um, so I'll link it in chat if anyone's interested. I'm very proud of it and I'm excited about it.
Awesome. Congratulations. That's definitely a big deal. So glad you shared it with everybody. Yeah, definitely incorporate that in the notes and or in the chat, and we'll put in the notes. And feel free to utilize the listserv if you'd like to spread the word even further. That's great. Additional items to share. It looks like in the chat we have a message from Dawn Marie who mentions posting their latest YouTube conversation, the topic being on research about whether or not self-identity in autism is valid. Oh, that sounds intriguing. And Dawn Marie includes a link to that. We'll put that in the notes as well. Thank you for sharing. Additional items. All right, sensing a pause. If you would like to drop something in the chat, feel free to do so, and I'll incorporate those later on. I think folks are eager to learn from our presenters, so I'm going to pin them to the screen so we can learn from them. And if you just give me 1 second to add folks, and whoops, trying to add you, Carly. Hang on 1 sec. It's fun to multitask. Let's see. I see Katie, and then there's Carly. Alrighty. Really glad to be in community with these folks. These are some of my very close colleagues and friends, folks who have been part of the integral parts of our nationwide study of autistic college student success um, over recent years. And today they're going to be sharing more about one of our papers that stemmed from this. And um, so I'm really eager to for them to share their insights with everybody. So we have here, and I'll let them introduce themselves more thoroughly. But we have Many of you may know Katie McDermott, who's a consultant and with McDermott Transition Services, and Carly Ball Isaacson, a postdoc with us at based out of Michigan State University. So look forward to hearing from Katie and Dr. Isaacson and turn it over to them. And feel free, as you're listening, everybody, insert your comments, questions, reflections in the chat, and we'll allocate time at the end for them to address those. Over to you both.
Thank you so much, Brett. I assume that everyone can see my screen. And wonderful, you can hear me okay? Well, a very warm welcome to all of you who are present here, or for those who are watching the recording. I'm Katie McDermott, and I'm really pleased to be here with Carly and to talk about friendship experiences of autistic college students. Finding community is so important, and as we'll discuss in this presentation, and how wonderful that we have found community here through the College Autism Network as a means of our own belonging, both personally and professionally. And through this belonging, we can develop new professional opportunities. And I can attest to that because I attended my very first Canvas meeting back in 2018, and I would never have guessed that I'd be here presenting years later on this. So thank you to everybody involved in the College Autism Network for providing this space for all of us. So we offer you a very hearty welcome and look forward to engaging with you today on the topic of friendship experiences for autistic college students. So who are you here? What is your role? If you could put it into the chat. And then Carly, if you could look at the chat because I can't see it right now. I can't multitask. And just let us know who is here amongst all of us.
Yeah, looks like Kelly works with autistic high schoolers, including many who want to go to college. Rachel is a senior instructional designer and faculty developer. Beth's a coach. We've got doctoral student, more researchers. They're coming in faster, so I'm having to start to synthesize a little. So definitely looks like some grad students, researchers, and practitioners. This is looking like a really nice mix of people. We're so excited.
Well, we hope that this will be an engaging discussion and that everyone can perhaps have a takeaway here that they can use in their own professional work in the autism space. So, Carly, I will let you go ahead now and take it away.
Yeah, I get to be the problem child to start out with what's the problem. Um, so for this study, we found just looking through the literature, some stuff that I figure a lot of us already know, right? Which is that autistic college students hold the same goals of making friends as neurotypical counterparts. This is something that those of us who work with autism know. I think by and large that autistic students want to have friends, they want to make those connections. But unique ways that autistic students communicate and engage can sometimes make friendship development difficult for this group of people. As we were exploring the literature, we saw that there was really limited insight into friendship development and relationship building, how these processes work in specific autistic student context, and then also in how autistic students themselves perceive the role of friendship in their broader college student experiences. So, where do we come in? We developed a national longitudinal mixed method study among autistic college students, led by Brett and his colleague, Brad Cox. And the data from this study really allowed us to explore autistic college students' perspectives on friendship for this particular paper. It is a really big data set, as I will share on the next slide. But at the very end of this presentation, just to give you all a preview, we will plug because we are about to start the fourth and final wave of this longitudinal study. And we will be asking if folks are interested in distributing it. We would love to get your help to really maximize impact for this last round. To those of you who have already shared the study in previous years, we just want to express our gratitude and how much we really appreciate you for being a part of this project. Okay. So, to give some number context, what our study encompasses. So, as I said, we've done 3 waves of data collection so far. We've got between those 3 waves, well over 1,000 survey participants. And then within those, for the second and third wave, we did some nested interviews where we were selectively reaching out to participants who have historically been marginalized in autism research through a multi-tiered sampling approach. And through that, we've spoken with almost 80 college student participants through interviews across various means on Zoom face-to-face, through Zoom audio only, and then chat. And that's just in order to honor different ways of communication. And then most Kitty. Oh, yeah, she's already got the next one. But also in thinking about honoring different communication styles and preferences, we also provided this option for a photo voice response, which was an asynchronous activity where some participants responded to select prompts. There were 5 prompts for wave 2 and 7 for wave 3. And we asked them to respond to prompts about their college experiences using a photo and then a corresponding description for each one. For this final wave, just to let folks know who may be interested, we're actually going to be offering the opportunity for those participants who we select to do both the interview and photo voice portions of the study. There will be more compensation involved, of course, but we're really excited to see how seeing different angles on some of these issues can really lend toward even further enriching our perspectives on friendship development and general college student experiences among autistic folks. Super excited for that. And then just a little bit about our team. We are led by the courageous Brett and Brad. Um, so Brett and Brad are the PI and co-PI for this project. I am the postdoc for it, as Brett mentioned. And then we have a couple of great graduate students. Katie and Rebecca serve as our consultants, so I work with them quite a lot on day-to-day qualitative interviewing and coding and all the fun stuff. And then we also have some extended members of our team here. But we've got a really great team and we're excited to be working with everyone. Okay. So, and again, for this particular study, so I've given you a little bit of context into the broader project pieces. But for this study, we really were looking at this idea of friendship development, social connectedness. And in our literature review, we started with some general literature among minoritized college students. And in that, we found that affinity spaces tend to be really important for building bonds and then also solidarity in the face of marginalization. In terms of autistic students in particular, we saw some interesting work on this notion of disclosure. So, in thinking about social connectedness in terms of whether we disclose our autistic identities or other social identities. And we found that in the context of autism, that revealing autism diagnoses with peers comes with a lot of risk. So we, historically encourage folks to share their identities, and we want that to be a good thing. But we also recognize that these decisions are really complicated and hard a lot of times for autistic students. And so sometimes they will continue to mask or conceal their autistic identities to avoid that stigmatization. So, with that context into play, we drew for our theoretical framework from this study from Vaccaro and colleagues' 2015 theoretical model of belonging for college students with disabilities. So, thinking about disabilities more broadly, and we've got a diagram of this model here that you're welcome to check out in further detail if you would like. But it's just thinking about how belonging interconnects with these dimensions of self-advocacy, social relationships, and mastery. And this model for us served as a mechanism for understanding how autistic college students in particular can begin to foster that social connectedness. But then we have got some distinctions within our study. So again, we are focusing more specifically on autistic college students as opposed to students with disabilities at large. And so we've got accounting for distinctions associated with the autism community. thinking about things like executive functioning and niche interest and how those come into play when it comes to belonging and friendship development. We drew on a national sample. I realize I'm going kind of backwards here. So we had a really big sample of people to look at different manifestations of friendship development. And then we lastly centered belongingness across undergraduate education more broadly, whereas Vaquero and colleagues were specifically interested on that transition period. So, a little bit about our data collection. I won't spend too much time on this because I want to be sure that Katie has enough time to get to all of our findings and the fun stuff. But we did want to just give a little bit of an overview to show that, it was really important to us throughout the whole Pieces project to center autistic individuals who are often omitted from research. We had a really community facilitated approach in terms of both our data collection and also even thinking back to the design of the study. We really wanted to have autistic people front and center. um, we engaged with a lot of different sources to draw for this study, including autism-specific college support programs, social media, disability and higher ed listservs. We tried to be really robust with where we were recruiting folks for this study, to maximize its impact and also diversity, where possible with our sampling process. And then for this interview, so as I said, we did employ a maximum variation sampling protocol where we were really focusing on first longitudinal data. So if folks had participated in an interview 1 year, trying to see if we could get them back to participate another year and so that we could measure how things had changed. But then beyond that, we wanted to make sure that we were hearing from students of color, women, community college students, etc. So we stacked our processing, to draw from folks who held those various identities. For those of you who are involved in autism research, you probably know that autism research tends to be pretty white and male. So we wanted to do our best to diversify that and get some different perspectives on what autism can look like. For this study, we are specifically looking at the interview data from our second wave of data collection. So 43 folks of the 72 we contacted participated. And then in terms of our interviews were just over an hour long. They focused on a wide range of concepts, focused on autistic college students' broader experiences, but friendship was one dimension of that. And so we were able for this study to go back and look at those specific codes and excerpts that were focused on friendship development, in order to do the analyses for this paper. Okay, and then here's just again an overview of our key sample characteristics because we are pretty darn proud of it. Um, which is that we had 63% people of color, nearly half women, over a third identifying as trans, 81% reporting a sexual orientation that was not straight or heterosexual. Nearly a fifth were community college students, and then nearly half had transferred from a community college. So again, this is not perfect. And even thinking toward this next wave, we're always looking to increase our representation from these marginalized groups. But it is something front and center for our minds, making sure that we continue to prioritize diversity and get these insights that have historically been omitted from a lot of autism research. Okay, so the data analysis, again, this is just autistic college students. We wanted them to be front and center. We engaged in member checking where they're reviewing their transcripts, or summaries of their interview transcripts, so that they can offer clarity, make any edits. We wanted them to be involved, make sure that we were prioritizing the things that they cared about. And then we also wrote some analytic memos just to enhance our trustworthiness. And then the broader study did entail developing codes from this iPace framework that our team came up with. We're happy to share more about that if folks are interested, but won't for the sake of today's presentation. And then we established intercoder reliability, or a fancy word of saying just agreement. We wanted to make sure that what Katie was seeing in these transcripts is also consistent with what I was seeing when we were doing our analysis. So we engaged in that process. And then, as I said, we pulled codes referencing friendship for this particular paper. Okay. And then we did follow the Academic Autism Spectrum Partnership in Research and Education Principles, or ASPIRE, where we were testing the protocol with students, sending in advance to increase familiarity and using concrete questions. Our team, we're so lucky that our team includes autistic and neurodivergent authors, as well as people like Katie, who work close with the autism community in their day-to-day practices. And we were really intentional about thinking how those positionalities influenced the way that we were analyzing this data as we went through it through our reflective memos. And with that, I will turn it over to Katie for the findings, the fun stuff.
So there were 3 themes illuminated in this study. Number 1, engaging in autistic spaces. Number 2, practicing autistic authenticity. And 3, bonding over shared interests. So let's look at them now. Theme 1, engaging in autistic spaces. Participants mentioned such value in engaging in various post-secondary autistic spaces because these spaces afforded this sense of connectedness. And one of these types of spaces that participants mentioned was in autism-specific college support programs. 15 out of the 43 participants mentioned that they engaged in these programs. And it's just worthwhile to note that 17 out of 43 participants did say that their college did have one of these. So 15 participants being in these programs. And as you can see, Worms here spoke about the fact that there was a lot of mutual respect and understanding within these autistic spaces, and that participants highlighted the value of being surrounded by peers who truly understood what it was like to be an autistic college student. And that the participants mentioned the utility of engaging in these autistic spaces during certain junctures of their life, especially if they had just previously received a diagnosis before coming into college, or even if they were navigating the autism diagnosis process in college. One participant, Ren, shared that knowing they had the support within these autistic spaces while they were receiving, or while they were newly diagnosed, having that support if they needed to turn to somebody was so useful. A theme expressed here by Maddie describes having autistic spaces that are liberating spaces. So Maddie says here, in college, I've met more people who were neurodivergent, who were open about it, which isn't something I had experience with. I think that's been really positive and affirming when I think of interactions that I've enjoyed. That's kind of the common thread. Maddie attended a conservative religious high school with less, where there was pressure to mask, but now in this liberating space, these autistic spaces with less pressure to mask, Maddie's able to enjoy the interactions that are positive and affirming. And noteworthy here is that within these autistic spaces, participants mentioned that they would benefit from university support to facilitate connections within these autistic spaces. And we'll speak speak more about that later during the implications. The second theme, practicing autistic authenticity, was another key theme to emerge. Like neurotypical peers, autistic college students are looking to weed out those unsupportive individuals in their life, and then to really prioritize peers who are kind and caring and patient and reassuring and demonstrating that kindness. And often this support surfaced with peers with whom they could unmask and discuss their diagnoses. And the participants recognized and living the power of their truth in settings where peers would demonstrate greater understanding and relatability. One participant, Mavis, spoke about giving a capstone presentation about the autistic college student experience and had class peers come up to them afterwards and share their appreciation. And Mavis spoke that has gone towards Mavis developing a stronger sense of autistic self. And so that self-confidence and that autistic pride that came through in that one capstone. And still determining to what extent that they could openly share about their autistic identities, it really considerably ranged. So there's a great deal of vulnerability in deciding whether to unmask and build new friendships. And this is evident in this quote here from Parker. I feel like I have to mask more in public because I feel like a lot of people on my campus aren't really too aware of people with autism or people who are neurodivergent. I feel like I have to mask more because I'm afraid of how people will treat me if I don't. So that really describes that vulnerability in making that decision to unmask and practice autistic authenticity. But this transparency that they do have with friends can be transformative. And such is the case here with Trees, who commented that their friendships have been the most authentic that they've ever been since they've come to college because of this intentional unmasking. And then the more authentic that they become themselves, that the stronger their relationships become. Another example, and I have to say, I'm so appreciative of these students sharing these examples. It really makes this come to life. And so I just wanted to express that moment of gratitude to all of these participants. Mavis gave an example of the fact that they have a hand-eye motor coordination difficulty and that their group of friends was going to play pool, and they were very nervous about this, but that because their friends demonstrated such patience and care with them, they had a great experience with playing pool. Or another participant, Taylor, was speaking about the stress that college life can bring from the social aspect. And that Taylor, because they are open because they have disclosed and said this, for me, this is, difficult from a sensory aspect, their friends say, yeah, take care of yourself. And that is a way to really to deal with that stress of the social aspect. But it's worthwhile to note that the complexities of practicing autistic authenticity, it has rewards and satisfaction in the right circumstances. And it's great that Mavis and Taylor had the right group of friends, but that it can also feel draining and occasionally disappointing. The third theme, bonding over shared interests, was one of the themes that I was most interested in because of the variety of experiences and clubs and activities that the students participated in. If you go into the Google Doc that Brett posted, there's a link to the manuscript, and table 1, I don't know what page it's on, but table 1 in the manuscript has a listing of the campus involvement or community building examples that the students presented. 39 out of 43 mentioned being involved, and it's just really so interesting. So I suggest you hopping in there to check that out. But they talked about that bonding over shared interest and passion was an avenue to finding the sense of belonging. And some students continued an activity that they had been participating in high school, like music or choir or theater, while others developed a new interest that just started during college. And some students developed a club because the college didn't offer something that was of interest to them or of their passion. So for example, Hope created a disability club, and Lindsay started a fiber art circle. So interesting. And that being a part of these clubs developed this wonderful sense of belonging and community for them. And Alice explained that being a member of her online disability justice book club, it felt like coming home. I think that is such a strong quote to, really speak about this experience of finding that sense of belonging for an autistic college student. And participants listed the benefits of being in disability or in dedicated disability spaces linked to identity, for advocating for themselves or advocating for others, such as Hope and Bones here, who were in neurodiversity clubs and other disability clubs. And then engaging in things that you're really passionate about. For example, Evan was really passionate about Taylor Swift and love to talk about that. And important to note here that it's not always structured, scheduled events that students were finding the bonding over shared interests. John mentioned that sometimes just, being creative together was so useful, and the casual hangouts, playing video games, or even having cat play dates. It's not scheduled, but having cat play dates, isn't that just delightful? But that there was really a sense of connectedness that was derived from leaning into somebody else's autistic passion, and then having that sense of mutual respect and interest and curiosity. So our study extends new perspectives on how autistic students cultivate friendships, which is really a key part of the campus experience for all students. There's nuance. We noted the nuance in how autistic people handle finding belonging in college. And that is especially evidenced in that piece of autistic authenticity. And that finding friendships does not follow one common path, and that there were a variety of channels and unique mechanism that facilitated friendship, where it was finding like-minded people who had similar passions, similar interests. And I want to say that it wasn't always happening on the physical college campus, that there was a lot of discussion about finding community in spaces such as nature, people going hiking and climbing, engaging in photography that was happening off campus. John mentioned photography, and Jean was hiking and climbing. Or this idea of being in an online space, which is very accessible for students. Maybe there's a fandom space, online cosplay, or even one participant took an online photography class, and that led to opportunity for making new social connections within photography. And they talked about the accessibility of that. And there's this, most notably is this idea around practicing autistic authenticity, which reveals really the vulnerability that autistic college students demonstrate to live more authentically. And again, we want to highlight that this does not come without risks such as rejection, stigmatization, or threats to well-being like anxiety, fatigue, especially burnout. But participants found that disclosing their diagnoses could strengthen their peer understanding and acceptance, and that led to this sense of belonging in these autistic spaces, especially involvement in the autism-specific support programs, being involved in support groups or clubs within campus, and neurodivergent club, in the sense of advocacy for others during the diagnosis process. A lot of participants spoke about that. And it was just noted that it happened organically over time. It wasn't this, first month of school you develop your friendships. That it happened organically over time, not just in that transition period. So implications for practitioners. We see merit in providing club information in a few different accessible ways. We know that there are club fairs that happen at the beginning of the semesters, but also having alternative ways. So having maybe a QR code that's presented at the club fair for students who are not, able to communicate. We have varied communication styles. Maybe they don't want to interact at the club fair, so a QR code, perhaps with links to the website or the social media platforms of that school, having a dedicated contact person via email to reach out to, or even having like online open drop-in hours, whether it's in person or online. So just to really build that in, that piece of accessibility. And when students do want to make their own club, like the Fiber Arts Circle, having a how-to guide that is in plain language, that's not so extensive, and maybe a contact person to help with the timetables, the timelines and the timetables for that. And then, there's merit in engaging with the neurotypical peers to, do some more autism acceptance and awareness, and to reduce the burden on the autistic peers. And in terms of research implications for researchers, for all those who are on here today, trying to, how can you be involved in this? And so thinking about more longitudinal research for how autistic spaces, how the students experience them over time, and explore how specific types of spaces facilitate these friendships. So with that being said, what are some things that you are all doing on your campuses or in your practice that facilitate friendship? Let's go into the shared doc, and at the very end of the doc, we can just start a nice long list. And if somebody wants to unmute, if you don't want to write it, if you just want to unmute and say something really cool that you're doing, or it's something you're really proud of, and then maybe we can have a couple minutes, Brett, a couple minutes to engage in this type of curiosity points before we enter Q&A.
All good. Yeah, everybody insert your thoughts or share your thoughts aloud.
Oh wait, I should probably virtual raise hand, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was
Kelly.
raising my physical hand, but I'm like, there's 40 people. I might not be on the first page. Yeah, my institution, which is a high school serving neurodivergent students, has speed friending events throughout the semester. And I think what's really interesting is, it is not just students who are in those speed friending events. They also put faculty and staff in those groups as well, recognizing that, some students, want to, especially if it's a teacher for a course that they feel they're not doing very well in, they might feel like this person doesn't like me. But then, oh, if I see that this person, yeah, I still don't like their math class, but I see that we both are into Star Wars, then I think that can also, even in a non-social context, the next time they're in class, they can think, well, this person isn't like an enemy, or, just like a math robot who is giving me problems that I don't like.
Great example. Thanks, Kelly. Carly, I can't see the doc, so maybe if there's something that you want to highlight, or if somebody else wants to unmute.
I'm responding to the chat right now. Caden brought up a point that I think is worth maybe noting for the group in the chat, which he said that club fairs were a big challenge for a lot of participants in an interview study that he ran. And then that combined with there not being a lot of easy to find ongoing information about joining clubs once the fair was over, we saw both of those same things. The club fairs could be really sensory wise, just super overwhelming. And then same thing with that drop off. There was a lot of great information at the club fair at the beginning, but then it was like that is over and done kind of situation. So that seems like a really ripe area for expansion. I think for practice, just making more consistent efforts. And then Brett has put in the article link also, so that is helpful if people do want to read. People talking about, peer mentoring can be really helpful. I think we saw a lot of that in the study too, for thinking about the social part, so the friendship development, and then also the academic part of study skills. Peer mentoring could be really helpful. And then these sensory areas, a couple people have talked about that. Susan said that she had some in her library, um, and then had suggested a quiet area in a far corner of the dining room, which tends to be crazy noisy. And we saw similar, the sensitivity issues were really something that was tough when trying to make friends in these settings that could be um, more normal for some folks, like these big club fair, hyper sensitive areas. Those just weren't like the right avenues. So thinking about more sensory friendly spaces is definitely something front of mind. Um, Beth says, when I work with incoming college students, we try to check out the student activities webpage to see what might be available on campus. Um, and then she comments that she finds that these sites are often outdated or lack content information for clubs, and getting those sites updated can be very helpful for college students. We're seeing that right now, Beth, because we also recruit from some of these campus clubs, and the outdated information has been such a problem for us to even figure out, for us as researchers, how to access these clubs and contact folks about sharing the study, much less for a college student to try to navigate and figure out how to join. So definitely agreed there. Um, and then I think lastly, for probably this year, we'll say Caden said that there's been a want for a disability cultural center from students for a while, but they haven't been able to get high level admin buy-in, unfortunately. And that, I think, speaking to bigger policy issues, is an unfortunate reality of trying to get new disabled culture centers starting right now in federal higher education policy context is tough, which might be where some of these findings about more informal outlets that Katie talked about in our findings might be the best that we can do right now. Because we have also sensed that starting new disability cultural centers right now is going to be really difficult. Yeah. So our conclusion, just a few points to wrap up. You know, we've talked about autistic college students face unique considerations when seeking to form friendships. And these students are resourceful, and they're trying, and they are doing the best they can with what they have. But as higher education professionals and researchers, we must support autistic students along their friendship development journeys. And this work continues to build as we build out the infrastructure of our data set, which is the last slide that we wanted to leave you all on, is a call. If any of you are interested, as I said, this data set is really big. So we're looking at over 1,000 people in the survey, and we are about to add more to it. So because of that, we know that we're not going to be able to analyze all of this and get all of this great information and student data out there on our own. So we have opened up our data to other folks to where you can apply for external researcher access. I've put a QR code here to our list of available variables because right now we are just doing the quantitative data from the first wave, but qualitative data and later waves are going to be available too. So this may be something to bookmark regardless of what kind of research you want to do with it. If we don't have it now, we probably will on the external researcher facing side. And then we, oh, hang on one second, Katie, before you go to that next. Our PI, Dr. Brad Cox, has offered, if anybody is interested in using this data set, or if you have students, for those who are grad students or those who support students who might be interested in using this for a dissertation or something, for example, Brad is happy to meet with anybody. This is the second QR code is to his Calendly link. Okay. So yeah, now we have time for a couple questions and then one more QR code. We love QR codes here. But if you want to learn more about the broader Priestess Project, you can do that by accessing this final QR code. And as Brett said, we have time for a couple questions and maybe we'll stop sharing, Katie. We'd love to chat.
Did I
Hi.
stop?
Oh, this is Kelly Searsmith. I'm an advocate and a graduate student and the parent of an autistic graduate student, and I'm autistic myself. Um, And I've had 3 college students that I've worked with who are autistic, who did not form any friendships during undergraduate. And my son, in addition to that, has had no friendships undergraduate and none in graduate school, has never felt a sense of belonging, has tried everything that you discussed, has gone to all the my son has gone to all the neurodiversity groups, and he tried joining clubs and, all of it. He's tried all of it. And it's a feeling like maybe there's rejection sensitive dysphoria. People aren't reaching back. It just doesn't convert. They talk in sales about conversions to the sale. He will talk to people at the event, but they just don't invite him back. They don't invite him out for things. He would never, because of the more reserved type person he would never invite them to do something or start a club. He's just not socially confident in that way. And then on top of it, sometimes when he goes to the neurodiversity affirming groups, the ones run by the university or elsewhere, counseling center, whatever it might be, there's kind of gender politics because he is a white male. And I know we're talking about the importance of inclusion. And I completely endorse that and agree with it. But as a white male who is kind of passively non-binary, he hears a lot of messaging about how white males are negative or take up space or, judge others. So he's getting a lot of negative messaging about being a white male in those spaces, and it's making him feel really unwelcome there. So what happens with a student who is completely isolated, who maybe stops trying to reach out, or maybe never does reach out? Or the other thing I had with clients are ones who are very socially engaged, but they're so strange, and I love them for it, that people just reject them out of hand. One was mostly non-speaking, although he was an arts program for singing, for opera, and sang in several languages. And the other was just loved childish animated cartoons and would talk about them nonstop in a very loud voice. And it was off-putting to people. So what do we do for those students who are maybe trying, but they're just having no success because of either being active but odd, as they call us, or just end up trying and feeling completely isolated nonetheless? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question, for your comments. I would like to just take a moment and say it is very hard, and I appreciate the emotions that go into your son and the other people that you mentioned that don't have that sense of belonging and that sense of community and connectedness. And from this study here, I think that something that I take away when I'm working alongside autistic college students is the variety of pathways that are presented in this manuscript, that there is not just college-based, but then widening the lens to perhaps something that's more online-based, something not online, but then something in nature that has meant that the multiple pathways that there are to explore. And perhaps taking a look at that table of different community involvements there that might spark something in your son or in somebody else that you know that could just be, oh, I had never considered esports, for example. It could just be a way to generate new leads. That would just be something that I would offer as a comment, and I welcome anybody else's comments here.
I'll also add to, as we're disentangling the topic of friendship in subsequent waves of the data too, and larger topics, we're also seeing how, like, even though we much of our data presented, the stories of folks finding friendships and locating those spaces, it's not always easy. And I think we want to reinforce that that some folks share that, it takes a lot of trial and error, and also leaning into those special interests can afford, and I think Katie, you demonstrated this very clearly too, like that can be a really good mechanism in finding professional pathways that can, or majors that are of great interest to the student that can, as a byproduct, lead to colleagues or friendships. So I think what our narrative is trying to present and reflecting many of the experiences in real life is that there's a variety of manifestations of friendships and also re-envisioning of it too, even among some of the students we've spoken with who have shared how that for them their success is making the effort or trying to reach out, and for them they couldn't have imagined handling that a few years later. So wanting to both validate the experiences of the challenges and also reinforce the importance of re-envisioning what friendship success looks like is very variable across students
So
in general.
me, and I work primarily with high schoolers right now, so they're a little bit younger. But something I try to equip all the students I meet with before they go off to college is that, the goal of friendship isn't to 100% agree with, everything they say. Now, obviously, it's okay to have, lines that you don't want crossed, but it's also a case of, especially if you know the other person is neurodivergent, assuming best intent, learning what things are, it's okay if we have different opinions on. Like I worked with a couple of students who were like going over the list of like their favorite video games, and then like they were agreeing on like 9 out of 10 things, but like the 10th thing was they didn't agree on which Mario Kart was the best, and like they started to like drift apart after that. To trying to have a conversation about, okay, like you both like Mario Kart. It's okay that this person's favorite is Double Dash and yours is Wii. Like there are a lot of similarities in those games, or interrogating deeper about, why is that your favorite? Because you know, it might reveal, oh, like we look for the same things, but we came to different conclusions. That would be kind of a big piece of advice. And obviously, a one-off conversation doesn't put that information into a student's head, but doing, I call them like social autopsies of like, okay, like, you know, when you talk to a sibling, for example, do you agree with 100% of what they say? Do you think they're a bad person if they don't, feel the exact same way? As I think sometimes students can categorize something as a failure when, hang on, then maybe that was just a setback.
So,
Thanks for that. Thank you, Adero. We probably have about 1 minute for a comment before we have to wrap up, but please chime in.
yeah, I was just going to say that there are a couple of things that we do to try and help people to develop some type of communication relationship. And part of that is in our class, we're talking about networking today. So it's like networking is not just about work, it's networking is about life. And there's always creating those networks. And we have our social engagement opportunities, and we emphasize that the idea is to figure out when you can start a conversation. Are they ready to talk? Are they busy with somebody else and this is not a good time to join the conversation? And learning how to identify social cues that a person may not necessarily pick up on so that they can lead into some of those conversations that they've had difficulty starting.
All wonderful points. Thank you, Adero. Thank you, Kelly, as well, for those contributions, and Kelly Searsmith for the question. At this point, we need to wrap up because we're at the hour mark, but thank you again, Carly, Katie, for sharing our work, for our participants, for engaging, allowing us to draw from these insights and have some really fruitful dialogue about this. We encourage you to engage with the article that we have in the chat. And in the meeting notes, we'll be sending out the meeting recording following today. So it'll be sometime next week, so that way folks can access it further. And we'll see you back here in October on Tuesday, October 14th for a presentation from Doctors Soyeon Kim and Shan Lapointe on transitions, adjustments, and persistence, autistic undergraduates navigating higher ed. Until then, we wish you all a good rest of your week, and thanks for joining us.